After completing my 10th class exams in 1979, my father suggested that I go and help my father's uncle and learn astrology. Mathematics being my favorite subject, I learned the calculations. My grandfather taught me how to calculate the inclinations of each planet and how to calculate the Lagna and the meridian center MC, and he gave me some birth charts to draw. Thus, I learned how to draw the birth charts first and showed interest in predictions. So my grandfather told me some predictions, some of the tips that he usually uses for predictions, and after learning those tips I documented some of them. I verified with my father. While my father and my grandfather have laid the foundation for me to get interested in astrology, for almost a decade or 2 decades, I didn't show any interest. Let me start analyzing the first chart for this Vivah Vilamb. Uh, this is the fourth part and in this chart, this is a male native born on 21st September 1982 in Bangalore, and this particular native is unmarried as of April 2018. So that means it's over 30 years. His age is over 30 years. So I took this particular native's chart as an example to show what's the astrological justification why what made this particular native not to get married. First and the foremost, that I would, as soon as I saw the chart, the first and the foremost thing that I noticed is this particular native has Kala Sarpha Yoga or Dosha, depending upon whichever way you want to see it. And also Rahu is exactly in the 7th house from Rashi Lagna. That's the most toughest thing, is Kala Sarpa Yoga with Rahu in the 7th house. So there is what you call a rule or some sort of a conditional statement saying that wherever Rahu resides, he creates some sort of dynamic, chaotic in that particular house. That is for sure. In whichever house Rahu stays, he will do that. So now this Rahu is in the 7th house. So Rahu has to create some sort of a dynamic chaos for this particular native pertaining to 7th house, which is marriage. Now Rahu is having a direct aspect on the 1st house, which is the self. So that particular chaos to the marriage is for this particular native itself, for self, Tanustanamu. So let's go and now look at the other important, first of all, who is the 7th house lord? We start there. 7th house lord is Mercury. Mercury is residing in the 9th, 10th house, its own house. Mercury is the lord of the 7th and 10th houses, and it is residing in its own house. So that's one good sign for Mercury, because it is residing in the own house. And but if you look at it, it's also co-joined with the Sun, who is the 9th house lord, Dharmasthanadipati. So until now, Mercury co-joining with Sun in the 10th house has no problem for Mercury. So we can hope that Mercury, the 7th house lord, will make this native get married. But there is the first hurdle that native will see is the Rahu in the 7th house. The next thing you have to see is Mercury and Sun. They are co-joined with 2nd house lord Saturn. That's the biggest mistake here. Saturn is the 2nd house lord, Kutumbasthanadipati, is residing with Dharmasthanadipati Sun. Sun and Saturn are bitter enemies. So Kutumbasthanadipati has to do something that is against the Dharma. So because Sun, his bitter enemy is the Dharmasthanadipati. So the Kutumbasthanadipati has to do something that is against the Dharma. So two things is possible. Either the native gets married, and because Rahu is in the 7th house, the chaotic marriage leads into some sort of a marital problems, or they need to get married to someone who is in a inter-caste or inter-religion marriage, or the Netu never gets married. These are the three adharmas with respect to marriage that Saturn can do, so that its enemy's son will be in adharma. Now that Saturn is the 2nd house lord and look, it's staying in the 10th house, it is having a direct aspect on the 4th house. That's another thing you have to see here. Saturn is having a direct aspect on the 4th house, which is the home life environment of Sukhasthanam. So the 4th house has got spoiled from the marital perspective. Then Saturn's 3rd aspect is on the 12th house. 12th house is pleasures of bed, and that's where the 5th and the 12th house lord Mars is residing. So Mars is a violent planet and functionally malefic, and here Saturn is looking at Mars. Saturn, the 2nd house lord, is looking at the 12th house lord. So something that's against that is violent when it comes to the pleasures of bed is sure to happen, and something violent when it comes to Kutumbasthanam or family life or starting a family is sure to happen. These are all the things that are sure to happen. Fortunately, because Rahu is in the 7th house, fortunately the Netu could not get married just because of that reason. Had the Netu got married, all these issues might have come up immediately. Let's go and look at the Dasa systems. What are the Dasa systems next? And in that Dasa systems, let me try to explain what could be the, means we know that the marriage should happen before 30th, so we will see what dasas are running before the age of 30 for this particular Netu. Let's go and see the dasa system now. For this particular Netu, having born in 1982, by birth, at the time of birth, it is Jupiter Mahadasa running. That is the 1st house lord, 1st and 4th house lord Mahadasa is running. Basically, for any Netu, during the peak marriage period, that is between the age of 20 to 30, in this 10 years, if there is a Jupiter Mahadasa running, then the chances are very high for that particular Netu to get married. This Netus, by the time the Netu reached 20 years, Jupiter Mahadasa is over and the Saturn Mahadasa is running. Look at Saturn Mahadasa, it ran all the way till 2016. Oh my God. No wonder, because the Saturn Mahadasa is that long, and we have already explained, I have already explained how Saturn is impacting this particular Netu. The Netu will not have the ability to start a family at all, and so Saturn Mahadasa is done. The next comes is Mercury. Mercury is the 7th house lord, so people might say that, oh, the Mercury Mahadasa is awesome because it is the 7th house lord Mahadasa is coming, so the Netu might get married. But here if you look at it, Mercury is all the way till 2018 June, that is this June. So the chances are minimal, and I would say it is close to zero for this particular Netu to get married. But if the Netu has a desire to have an intercaste or inter-religion marriage, then yes, there is a slight possibility for the Netu to get married under that condition. If the Netu don't get married before 2018 June, then, oh yeah, by the by, until 2018 June, transit Saturn will be in Sagittarius. That means it is looking at the 7th house again. No way. So transit Saturn will not let that happen too. And natal Jupiter and transit Jupiter, the 1st house lord, they both are in the 11th house. Remember, 11th house is house of desires, and if there is any planet in the 11th house, nor if there is any malefic planet in the 11th house, then the chances are very high for the Netu to have lack of desire. Here, for this particular Netu, the functional malefic moon, which is the 8th house lord, is in the 11th house, co-joined with the 1st and 4th house lord Jupiter, and because Saturn is in the 10th house, it will spoil the 11th house, it will look at the 12th house, it is looking at the 7th, 4th house, and also 12, 11, 10. Saturn's 10th aspect is looking at the 7th house. So when you look all these things, the possibility is extremely is close to zero, because natal Saturn is looking at the 7th house, transit Saturn is now in the 1st house looking at the 7th house too. So the chances are close to zero for this particular native to get married. Let's go and now try to look at the same chart, the first male chart from using the Bihuru Chakra Paddhati. So as I said, usually when I look at the Bihuru Chakra Paddhati for marriage, I start at the age of 23. That's when Mercury activates the 12th house and goes all the way till the age of 36. That's when Venus activates the 12th house. That means a total of 13 years at the most. So in these 13 years, from age 23 till age 36, in these 13 years, if the native doesn't get married, the chances are close to zero to get married. So now let's start with at the age of 23, the possibility for the native to get married in India, and that to a male native, is close to zero. So we don't need to worry about that. I start from the age of 25. After the 25th birthday, before the 26th birthday, that's when Venus activates the 2nd house. So let's go and see where is natal Venus. Venus is in 7th, 8th and 9th house. Wow. Venus is the Dharmasthanamo. 6th house lord is residing in the Dharmasthanamo. 6th and 11th house lord is residing in the Dharmasthanamo. So the 2nd house from natal Venus is the 10th house. Yes, where the 7th house lord Mercury is residing, but at the same time your Saturn and Sun are also residing. So Venus, when it activated the 10th house, it didn't pertain to the marriage part of his life, the native's life. So the chances are minimal for the native to get married at that time. That is after 25th birthday and before the 26th birthday. So we go to the most crucial thing is after 27th birthday and before 28th birthday. That is September 2009 to 2010. Venus activates the 4th house. Venus activates the 4th house from Rashi Lagna, which is the Sukhasthanamo. Lord is Jupiter. Jupiter is in the 11th house, owned by Venus. So basically you can say that yes, when Venus activated the 4th house from Rashi Lagna, Venus, because the 4th house lord Jupiter is residing in the house owned by Venus, we can expect that the activation would have been positive side of it, and it would have resulted into a happy home life and a home life environment. But Jupiter, natal Jupiter is co-joined with the 8th house lord Moon. That means the functional malefic Moon. So Jupiter got afflicted. Thereby, when it activated, Venus activated the 4th house, nothing happened for this native. And from natal Venus, the 4th house is the 12th house, where the 12th house lord Mars is residing. And so when Venus activated the 12th house, Mars has got activated. But Mars is such a violent planet that the activation would not have created a violent environment when it comes to the pressures of bed. So probably it didn't happen. So the next one is when the native turned 30 years old and before the 31st birthday, that is September 2012 through 2013. Venus activates the 7th house. From Rashi Lagna, the 7th house, when Venus activates, Rahu is residing, so the activation got nullified. It didn't go through. So from Venus, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. From Venus, the 7th house, from natal Venus, the 7th house is the 3rd house, which has nothing to do with the marriage. So between 2012 and 2013 September, when Venus activated the 7th house, nothing happened. So the last possibility for this particular native is to go all the way till September 2017 through September 2018. This is this current year. So this is May 2018. So before September 2018, we have to see, is there a possibility for the native to get married? First of all, Venus activates the 12th house. So from Rashi Lagna, the 12th house is Mars, where the 12th house lord himself is residing. That's okay. And from Venus, the 12th house is the 8th house. So when Venus activated the 8th house and the 12th house, it's not going to happen much. Also, when you look at transit Saturn is now is in the first house, having a direct aspect on the 7th house, and natal Saturn's third aspect is on the 12th house. Transit Saturn, when Venus direct aspect is on the 7th house, so transit Saturn 12, 11, and transit Saturn 10th aspect is on natal Saturn and the 7th house lord Mercury and its bitter enemy Sun. So the chances for this particular native to get married before September 2018 is close to zero. That's the only thing I can say at this point. Let me start analyzing the second chart, male chart. The native was born on 25th March 1980, and yeah, so let's see. 1980 means right now, as of April 2018, the native is unmarried. That means that the native is almost 38 years old, approximately 38 years old, and still unmarried. So I felt that this is the best. This is the chart for those who are learning astrology to see what is the reason for this particular native not to get married. First and the foremost, when I looked at it, the native has Kala Sarpha Yoga or Dosha, depending upon whatever it is. And look at it, the Rahu. The position of Rahu is again in the 7th house. As I said earlier, wherever Rahu stays, he creates some sort of a chaos in that particular house, or characteristics of that particular house. Now the Rahu is in 7th house, so the chances are this for this particular native to get married is minimal. Just by looking at Rahu, you can say that. Now we got to figure it out, is there any other planet that is strong enough so that the chaos that Rahu is creating gets minimized. When you look at it, who is the 7th house lord? The 7th house lord is Sun. Sun is in the 2nd house, owned by Jupiter. That's a good sign. So we can say that because Sun is in the 2nd house, the 7th house lord is in the 2nd house, so you can have some sort of a hope that the native, there's a possibility for the native to get married. And then the 4th house lord is Venus, 4th and 7th, 8th, 9th. 4th and 9th house lord Venus. So Venus is a good sign here, so hopefully that's fine. Then the 5th house lord is 5th and 8th house lord. This is very important here. 5th and 8th house lord is Mercury. So being the 8th house lord, Mercury became a functional malefic. So let's go and see, where is Mercury residing. Mercury is residing in the 1st house. There goes the problem. Mercury is residing in the 1st house. It is a functional malefic. From the 1st house, Mercury is directly looking at the 7th house, where you have two malefics, Saturn and Rahu, and one violent planet, Mars. All the three, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the 4 of them are residing there, and this functional 8th house lord, functional malefic Mercury, is looking at them. So also your Saturn, Jupiter and Mars, Rahu, all the 4 of them are directly looking at the 8th house lord. So the chances are that this particular native to have marriage that is acceptable in the society is close to zero. Now let's go and look at 12th house lord. The reason I say is that Saturn is the 12th house lord. Saturn and Jupiter are co-joined in the 7th house. So the 12th house lord, that is Saturn, 10th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, no, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Yep, the 12th house lord is 12th and 1st house lord is Saturn, and it is co-joined with the 3rd and the 10th house lord Mars, and the 2nd house lord Jupiter. Because Saturn is co-joined with Jupiter, Jupiter became a functional malefic here too. And Mars by default is a violent planet, which is in the 3rd house, where a violent planet owns the third house and the 10th house, so the chances are nothing. So when you look at these major planets, the Rashi chart, there itself you can say this because of the stuff, the reasoning justification I gave earlier, the chances for this particular native is close to zero. Let's go and see how the Vimsottari Dasa, does it cooperate or not. So for this second native, let's go and start looking at the Vimsottari Dasa. At the time of birth, the Vimsottari Dasa for this particular native is again Jupiter. Remember even the chart 1, the example 1, we had Jupiter is at the time of birth, and because Jupiter became malefic and it doesn't matter anymore after that. By the time the native turned 20 years old, the Saturn Mahadasa star is running, and it went all the way till 2006. 2006 means 1980. Is it 1980, right? The date of birth is 1980. 1980 to 2006 means 26 years old. So until the age of 26, because of Saturn's Mahadasa, the native has no chance to get married. The next comes is Mercury. When you see Mercury, what you can see is that Mercury is the lord of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, Mercury is the 8th house lord. That's a functional malefic, and it's residing in the first house. And I already explained how Mercury is having a direct aspect on the 7th house. A 8th house lord is having a direct aspect in the 7th house is not a good sign. That means the chances for this particular native to get married all the way till 2023 is close to zero. And now when you look at the transit planets, transit Saturn is right now in the 11th house, which is the 7th house from natal moon. So the 11th house is lack of desires. Once transit planet from 11th house moves to the 12th house, then it becomes the Ashtama Shani for the native, which is, that means the 8th house from natal moon. So because of the impact of the Ashtama Shani, and that too on the 12th house, the chances for this particular native to get married for the next 5 years is zero. Let's now start looking at the same second chart. This time let's go and look at the Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati. When you look at the Bihurugu Chakra Paddhati, in case if you want to look at the way whether the possibility for the native to get married or not, you start at the age of 23 and go all the way till the age of 36, because at the age of 23 Mercury activates the 12th house. Here for this particular native, Mercury is the 8th house lord, so the chances for this particular Mercury to activate the 12th house is close to zero. Even though Mercury is having its 7th aspect, with its 7th aspect is looking at the 12th house, Mercury activates the 12th house, and it is looking at the 12th house lord Saturn in the 7th house. At the age of 23, after the 23rd age and before the 24th age, the possibility for any male to get married in India is almost close to zero. So this, since the native is a male, it's not worth looking at this. So we go all the way till the Venus cycle ruler is Venus, which started in 2004 and went all the way till 2016. So let's see when Venus where is Venus? Venus is in the 3rd house. So Venus from 3rd house is the 4th house and the 9th house lord. Venus is residing in the 3rd house. Its direct aspect is on the 9th house. 9th house is Dharmasthanam. So Venus is now residing in the house owned by Mars, and it's looking at the Dharmasthanam, its own house. So Venus basically has the ability to make this native get married. So let's go and see during which period is it possible. First thing you see at the age of between 25 and 26, it activates the 2nd house from its natal position. 2nd house from its natal position means the 4th house from Rashi Lagna, and it owns that. So the possibility was very high at that time. Also Venus activates the 2nd house from Rashi Lagna, which is Kutumbasthanamu, and the 7th house lord is residing. So there might be some strong indication for the native to get married between the age after the age of 25 and before the age of 26. And now let's not worry at this point why the native got married, but that was the highest possibility. Again, the next possibility is after the age of 27 before 28, that is when Venus activates the 4th house. See, from Rashi Lagna, when Venus activates the 4th house from Rashi Lagna, it is its own house. 4th house is Sukhasthanamo or home life environment. And the 4th house from natal position of Venus is the 6th house. That's the drawback there. The 6th house is the house of separation. So while it activated the 4th house from Rashi Lagna, it also activated the 6th house from Rashi Lagna, which is the house of separation. So there was a possibility, but something went wrong and the native was not able to get married at that time. So the last possibility, this last but one possibility is after the age of 30 before the age of 31. That is between 2010 and 2011 March 2010 through March 2011. Venus activates the 7th house. The 7th house from Rashi Lagna is where you have Saturn, Rahu, Jupiter and Mars. So it's not worth activating that house. Now let's go and look at the 7th house from its natal position is the Dharmasthanamo, its own house. So it activated the Dharmasthanamo and it activated the 7th house, but that activation was not strong enough. So the native could not get married at the age between age 30 and 31. The last possibility is Venus activating the 12th house. That is in between March 2015 and 2016. Venus, when it activated the 12th house from Rashi Lagna, that means it activated the house owned by Saturn. Venus and Saturn are okay. So there is no bad relationship between them. So that's fine. And the 12th house from its natal position is the 2nd house from Rashi Lagna. That is owned by Jupiter and where the 7th house lord is residing. So what surprised me is that how come the native did not get married between 2015 and 2016 of March. So we don't know what exactly has happened at that time, but what we know is that the native did not get married at that time, at that period. So basically the planetary combination has provided an opportunity for the native to get married between March 2015 and 2016, and for some reason which we don't know, the native did not get married. So after 2016 the chances are close to 0 for this native to get married. In a number of presentations I had explained the impact of multiple planets in a specific house. When I looked at this chart, I just recollected those the analysis that I did it, and I felt like I reiterate here because there were three planets and Rahu, total 4. 4 of them are residing in one particular house. Rahu is a terminator and also Rahu is the one that creates chaos. So the 7th house is chaotic. That's the first and the foremost thing that's given. And now let's try to look at the 3 other planets. Who are they? You have Jupiter. Basically Jupiter is a benefic in general because it owns Jupiter owns the 2nd house, Marakasthanamo, and also the 11th house, house of desires. Because Jupiter owns the Marakasthanamo and the house of desires, and it has co-joined with the malefic planets, 2 things are given. Number 1, the house of desires will be the native will lack the desires. Will have a lack of desires. So let's not see what are those desires. Second thing is 2nd house. So the native will lack the desires pertaining to 2nd house. 2nd house here is Kutumbasthanamo and Dhanasthanamo. Kutumbasthanamo means starting a family. Dhanasthanamo means wealth. So basically the native will have problems when it comes to starting a family and also having wealth. So That's the first thing. That's how the Jupiter has spoiled it. The next one is Mars. Mars is the 3rd house lord and the 10th house lord. Because Mars has co-joined in the 7th house with Jupiter, Rahu and Saturn, the 3rd house is daringness or something like that. We don't need to worry about the 3rd house. The 10th house is career, so the career will be a little bit dynamic, and there is no steady nice career to think about, because remember already the 2nd house got spoiled. So if the career is not good and the native is not from a wealthy family, then the native will lack the wealth. The last planet that we need to look at is the Saturn in the 7th house. Saturn is the 1st and 12th house lord residing in the 7th house. So the 1st house lord, being the 1st house lord, it has a unique characteristics, and then being the 12th house lord, it always tends to have the pleasures of bed, that is from the spouse, not in the same caste or religion, in a lower caste if you are in India, or from a different religion. Now let's go and try to look at 2 important things. Saturn's aspects. Saturn's 3rd aspect is on the 9th house, Dharmasthanamo. So it has to spoil the Dharma, and which is owned by Venus. Venus is the 4th and 9th house lord, and Saturn has spoiled the Dharmasthanamo. Next, Saturn's direct aspect is on the 1st house, and then Saturn's 10th aspect is on the 4th house. 4th house is Sukhasthanamo or home life environment, and 4th and 9th houses are both owned by Venus. That means Saturn is looking at the houses owned by Venus, both the houses owned by Venus. And the next thing is, so naturally the 4th house is spoiled, and now your Dharmasthanam is spoiled, and the 1st house is completely spoiled. Now let's go and look at the second one, the malefic, the functional malefic, Jupiter. Jupiter's 5th aspect is on the 11th house, house of desires. So, and its own house. So by becoming a functional malefic, it is looking at its own house. So naturally, the house is got afflicted. And then Jupiter's 7th aspect is on the 1st house, and Jupiter 9th aspect is on the natural 7th house lord Venus. First of all, Venus is the natural 7th house lord, and here in this chart Venus is the 4th house lord. So a malefic afflicted Jupiter is now looking at the natural 7th house lord and the 4th house lord on the chart. So naturally the 4th and the 7th houses got spoiled. Now let's go and look at the next planet, Mars. Mars direct 4th aspect is on 1, 2, 3, 4 is on the 10th house, its own house. Okay, and Mars direct aspect is on the 1st house, and then Mars 8th aspect is on the 2nd house. When Mars is looking at the 2nd house, that means it creates some sort of a violent environment pertaining to 2nd house. And who is residing in the 2nd house? If you look at it, the 7th house lord is residing in the 2nd house. That means Mars is looking at the 7th house, 2nd house, where the 7th house lord is residing. So when you consolidate all this information, what you can see is that nothing seems to be so stable enough to say that this particular native will have a possibility to get married and start a family, or will have a good home life environment. So since all the other things were so dynamic and unstable, the primary part for to start a family, to have a home life environment, to fulfill the desires, and to have the pleasures of bed, for all of these, the primary is getting married, which is the 7th house. Hence the 7th house, which is got afflicted, has made the native not to get married until now. Thank you for watching my video. This video is a unique explanation, examples that I had in this video. when you look at the two examples that I picked up, both of them were male. Both of them had Kala Sarpha Yoga or Dosha, depending upon the way you look at it. And for both of them, Rahu is in the 7th house. So whenever you see these three combinations, then it is always advised that not to rush to any conclusion when it comes to, especially the 7th house being the marriage. When it comes to the possibility of for the native to get married, I would recommend that please don't rush to any conclusion. Along with the 7th house, try to look at the other important houses like the 2nd house, Kutumbasthanamu, 4th house, Sukhasthanamu, 6th house, house of separation, or the possibility to get divorced or possibility to become a widow. And then the 9th house, Dharmasthanamu, the 11th house, house of desires or Kamasthanamu, and the 12th house is the pleasures of bed. So when you see Kala Sarpha Yoga and Rahu in the 7th house, I would recommend that please look at into all these other houses before coming to a conclusion about the possibility for the native to get married. Hope you liked this presentation. I'll try to include more examples in this, something similar to this type. Thank you very much.